Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be diving into the critical relationship between toxins and inflammation with regards to brain health. So this is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be necessarily that we're looking at one particular lifestyle factor this evening, but in fact we'll be looking at all the different lifestyle habits that determine whether your body is able to detoxify and control inflammation. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be diving into the critical relationship between toxins and inflammation with regards to brain health. So this is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be necessarily that we're looking at one particular lifestyle factor this evening, but in fact we'll be looking at all the different lifestyle habits that determine whether your body is able to detoxify and control inflammation. Despite toxins and inflammation appearing to be separate processes, they're actually very much related and equally impactful when it comes to our brain, which is an exceptionally sensitive organ. So the more challenges that we face in detoxifying and the greater the inflammatory impact on our body as a whole, it will become more impactful on our brain. When it comes to brain health, our delicate brains bear the brunt of damage if either of these processes are not working properly. So we're going to look closely at the role of detoxification and inflammation with the intention of keeping both processes working smoothly as yet another means of ensuring optimal brain function. So, again, our disclaimers. I will not be providing any medical advice during this talk. The information that I'm going to present is for educational purposes only, and I don't want you to discontinue any medications without consulting your prescribing practitioner. The agenda for tonight, again, is detox or detoxification and inflammation, and we're going to talk about what they are, how they're related, how they affect brain health, and what you can do to upregulate them so that they're working properly. So toxins and inflammation, the whole significance of it for brain health is that both of them, if they're not working properly, will damage your brain. Just to clarify, we don't use the word toxin very often in conventional medicine. So your conventional medicine practitioner may not even understand what you mean if you refer to a toxin. When I talk about toxin, I'm talking about a molecule or substance in the body that's trying to convert to a neutral state so that your body can get rid of it, because maybe there's no use for it, or maybe it can be potentially harmful for your body. This may be something that you take in from the outside world, or it may be something that your body makes when it's using a molecule and it's converting it to a different form. So a good example of this might be estrogen, which is converted to no less than 17 other forms in the body, some of which are quite harmful to the body and need to be converted to a more neutral form and eliminated from the body. So that's just one example. Another conversion that takes place in the body is the conversion of oxygen to carbon dioxide and water. And again, the carbon dioxide is a molecule that needs to be released from the body because not only do you not need it anymore, but too much carbon dioxide is harmful to the body. So the thing to remember when it comes to, one more thing, the less we are able to detoxify, the more inflammation it tends to cause in the body. Neither toxins, which are oxidized molecules or free radical molecules, those are other names we're going to use for them, or inflammation are good for the brain. And in fact, both can be very damaging. So the thing to remember is that if detoxification does not go well, you'll end up with damaged cells everywhere, including the brain, and this will set up an inflammatory reaction in the body. So it's this spiraling effect or snowballing effect, we could call it. So detoxification. It's just the ability of our body to take certain chemicals and molecules and convert them into a form that we can then release from the body. In the course of our day, our body repackages everything. It converts all types of substances into a form that can be either released or reused. Some of the substances or toxins that we take in are from the outside of our body. Like external toxins that we might be talking about would be things that you find in the air, like air pollution, water, that might be different chemicals that we find in our water. Food has certain toxins like pesticides, or, maybe just bacteria. Cooking can create toxins, especially if you're using certain types of cookware or you're cooking at high heat. And cleaning products, but also, just general hygiene products. Okay. And then there are sources of toxins that are from internal sources in our body. So the byproducts from just breathing, worrying, eating, all of those things produce different molecules that then need to be converted to sometimes a more highly reactive form, but then eventually to a neutral form that can be released from the body. So sleeping, moving, exercising can produce toxins. We already said stress, but weight loss is also another one of those. So the whole idea to understand here is that detoxification, put very simply, is generally thought of as a three-step process, or you could call it a two-step, but it's also a three-step process. So that's why I'm going to present it that way. A potential toxin is converted to a molecule called a free radical, and a free radical is then converted to a neutral molecule, meaning it has no electrical charge. And then in the last step, the neutral molecule is escorted out of the body through various means of elimination. So we'll talk about all three of these steps in a little more detail. If you have an unbalanced detoxification process in your body because of an unhealthy diet, what happens is you get a toxin, a molecule that you might want to get rid of. It's converted to a free radical pretty easily in most people. But the next step, converting it to a neutral molecule, does not go well if you don't have the right nutrients in your diet to convert it to a neutral form. And then if you can't convert it to neutral, it's not going to go through step 3, an elimination step here, because it hasn't been converted to neutral yet. So either a free radical or a neutral that gets stuck in your body because maybe you're constipated, those two molecules then go back into the body and can cause quite a lot of damage throughout the body. So it is a healthy diet that helps you move from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and an unhealthy diet that blocks these various steps, especially 2 and 3, and you end up with this damaging molecule in your body. So the whole idea is not to necessarily avoid all toxins, because you can't. We breathe air, we drink water, we eat food, and then our body makes toxins of its own. So it's impossible to avoid toxin buildup in our body. The solution is to avoid unnecessary exposures, if you can, from the outside, and then to help your body do what it was so beautifully designed to do in the first place, and that is to be detoxifying all of the time. Two things I want you to remember about this slide. It's a very complicated slide, but I want you to know that. I want you to know that this process of detoxification is anything but simple. It requires a wide variety of colorful vegetables and fruits, a rainbow of foods to accomplish it. So this slide of the liver just illustrates those processes that take place in the liver and the numerous substances that are needed in order to do these three phases of detoxification. And in order to do that, it requires the necessary nutrients. So step one is just when you get a toxin or you develop a toxin in your body, and your body, the first thing it does is create what's called a free radical. This is, again, from things like breathing, eating, thinking, sleeping, growing, digesting, and exercising. But also, these are also toxins, again, that you get from the outside. So we want this process to be going on all the time. You create this free radical. And interestingly, the free radical is actually a charged molecule. Okay, so it's a relatively neutral, not completely neutral, but it's a relatively neutral molecule before we create this charge on it. And this is called a free radical. And a free radical or molecule with a charge is very much like a live wire. It's a molecule that has a positive or a negative electrical charge, and everything it touches, it damages. So these molecules that have this extra charge, they may be bouncing off everything, just like, this live wire bouncing into everything, causing damage everywhere it touches. And the idea is to attempt to neutralize this free charge. And so that's what our body does. It takes this free radical that is, if you'll notice on the far left, this free radical molecule has 7 charges. Those are the little orange balls. And it wants one more because that will make it feel better. It'll make it feel more neutral. So it grabs an electrical charge from a cell nearby. That's why they're bouncing into other things. Every other cell they're touching, they're trying to grab an electrical charge from that cell, which stabilizes them, this free radical, and it destabilizes the cell that it bumped into, and it becomes a damaged cell. And let's show you one more thing like that. So when I say that we want to neutralize this molecule that has this unpaired charge so that it doesn't grab the charge from the surrounding cells around it, what I mean is that we take antioxidant foods that donate these charges to those unstable molecules rather than have them steal the unstable charge from the cells, because we need our cells to be in a neutral state, which is a healthy state, and we don't want them to be losing their charge because that makes them unhealthy and they can't do what they're supposed to do. In fact, many times what you'll see is that they develop what we call oxidative stress. So this is a good example of it, this illustration here, a tomato that is oxidizing because it's losing charges to the cells, starts to rot because all those cells start to die off. That happens in our body also. You get a normal cell, it gets attacked by these free radical molecules. They're stealing charges from that normal cell. They destabilize it. It becomes a cell with oxidative stress. It starts to shrivel and die off. And so again, rather than the free radicals stealing these extra charges from our normal cells in our body and causing us to age faster. We want the cell, not the cell, we want the radical molecule to be getting the charges from phytonutrients and vegetables. Antioxidants, which are found in fruits and vegetables, keep our body's cells neutral and healthy because they're donating these charges where they're needed. Plants have had billions of years to develop ingenious ways to detoxify. So when we eat those plants, these plants transfer many of the chemical pathways that they use for detoxification of their own environment onto us so that we can use those same chemical pathways in our body to detoxify and stabilize our own cells. So the most common antioxidants that are found in food sources are going to be things like vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E. Selenium is another one. You get that from Brazil nuts primarily. But there's so many phytonutrients that we don't know and don't really have a lot of research on or understand completely yet. And we're learning it all the time. But some plants can contain several hundred of these plant nutrients that work together not only to keep the plant healthy, but then when they are in our body to confer some of that same benefit to us to keep us healthy. So the foods with the most antioxidants are generally going to be the dark berries, the dark foods, and the dark colored or deep colored fruits and vegetables. So dark berries, pomegranates, goji berries, spinach, kale, dark chocolate, pecans, red and purple, cabbage, beans, kale, strawberries, green tea, artichokes. But essentially what I really want you to remember is that all fruits and vegetables have some antioxidant properties. So just don't underestimate a fruit or vegetable by its color, because some of the least colorful vegetables can still be some of the highest in nutrient value. For example, garlic, onions, and even I was going to say cauliflower and potatoes. So lots of value there. Step 3 is escorting that neutral molecule out of the body so that it doesn't get reconverted to a free radical and stored somewhere in the body to be released later. We want to move those neutral molecules that have been neutral, neutral molecules, the free radicals that have been stabilized out of the body. And so the body does this through urine and stool and sweat, tears, talking, breathing, sneezing, coughing. All of those are ways that we move these things out of the body. So just another beautiful array of phytonutrients to remember. And I want to move on though to our next slide, because what I really also want you to understand that when it comes to who is most effective by the ability to detoxify or not, and children are simply the most easily affected because they have a smaller body mass with which to contend with the effects of pesticides and other environmental toxins. The second group of people are those who are poor detoxifiers. And this is generally a genetic problem. And what we find is that in our population, that approximately 51% of the people are missing a large portion of the gene that is one of our main detoxifying genes. Now, we have several genes that are detoxifiers, but I would say there are 4 really huge genes that we use for detoxification. And out of those 4 genes, one of them is this one that more than 51% of the population are missing a piece of it, so it doesn't work well. And you can test for this, but I also know that you can determine when someone has a detoxification problem just by several things. One is that certain groups of people will be more sensitive to medications. Maybe they have unusual reactions to medications than the majority of the population, or maybe they come from families that are poor detoxifiers. You can tell by the number of cancers that run in that family, or maybe they're just people that are more sensitive to perfumes and exhaust and cigarette smoke, things like that. So again, just from the patterns that the person themselves is carrying or their family is carrying, we can often tell that those may be people that are poor detoxifiers. And so really, to detox or not, that's the question. And actually, in my mind, that is not the question. I think detoxification should not be something that you do once a year or once, every once in a while for a month. Detoxification is an ongoing day-to-day process, and you need to support it at all times. So, when considering the importance of it, we're going to talk about foods to eat and ways to cook and things like that will tell you if this is going to be something more important for you or not. So when it comes to organic foods or not having organic foods, there was a large study done, and actually it was done on a group of nurses years ago. And what they did was, I think that it was 20,000 nurses, and they studied these nurses with regards to whether they were eating organic vegetables and fruits or not, just conventional and just, washing them. And after studying them for many years, they decided they couldn't tell a difference in the health of these two groups of nurses. There was another study that was checking in with regards to pesticide residue, and they found pesticide residue on about 50% of non-organic produce that they tested, and another 31% of the produce that they tested had 2 or more different pesticides on it. So there are going to be certain fruits and vegetables that retain pesticides more strongly on their surfaces because they absorb the pesticide into the surface. So things like apples, tomatoes, peppers, peaches, string beans, leafy greens, and strawberries, probably raspberries and blackberries, especially, and blueberries. Anything like that we don't peel or that has a feathery or fuzzy type of surface are going to retain pesticides more. So I would think when you're shopping to be looking for those things in organic if you're going to go ahead and buy them. If you do end up bringing them home, at least wash them very thoroughly, although it's a little bit hard to wash something like a strawberry or a blackberry really thoroughly without just smashing the fruit. So think about it this way. Things that you peel are going to be much safer to eat if they are not organically grown. So you could take your apples and your peaches and peel them, and that would be a safer way to eat them. But, we don't normally peel things like tomatoes, so that would be one to consider buying organic. Things like avocados, bananas, corn, beans, not necessarily string beans because you eat the whole thing, but beans that are contained within the pod that we eat, those are going to be a little more protected from the pesticide sprays. And cabbage and cauliflower, things that actually have a covering that goes over them, those are going to be a little more protected, and you could probably be safe with those. But everything still, as much as you can, wash it thoroughly. In the end, what we say is that the benefits of eating fruits and vegetables are going to be far greater than not eating them. So, if you go to a restaurant and you can only get broccoli and it's non-organic, eat the broccoli. The benefit is still going to be far greater than not eating it at all. And when you have the ability to, to eat them at home and determine what's the best way of doing it, peeled, scrubbed, washed thoroughly if they're non-organic, and there will be a site on your resources called the Environmental Working Group. It's ewg.org, and it will give you a list of what we call the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, which gets updated each year for the vegetables that they test each year that maybe you want to consider avoiding if you can't buy them in organic form. So let's talk about meats for a second. So meats in general are something that we need for our brain, partly because we need the proteins, but you can get all of those proteins with plants also. But when you eat organic meats, just like organic vegetables and fruits, they are still a possible source of other kinds of toxins and even heavy metals. So both organic and conventional meat can have environmental toxins like dioxin and PCBs and cadmium, lead, arsenic, things like that, because we really don't test those meats, and we don't test fruits and vegetables for those things for the most part. Organic meat is still preferable if you're going to eat meat because it's less likely to contain some pesticides, but it's not necessarily free of those toxins. And if it's not grass-fed, it may be particularly likely to be higher in saturated fats, which is not necessarily good for your brain. So for our brain health, we want our meats to be carefully sourced, grass-fed if possible, eaten in moderation, and really more as a condiment rather than a main course. The question of rinsing and soaking. So this comes up occasionally, and rinsing and soaking is really recommended for certain people, especially if they have a lot of inflammation, in order to avoid what we call lectins. Lectins have a tendency to increase inflammation in some people, and we sometimes find arsenic in rice, and so the purpose of rinsing and soaking is to decrease the potential of these particular toxins and plant products that could be problematic for some people. Overnight soaking is usually what's recommended, but I rarely remember to do that. And what they have found is that if you rinse prior to cooking, that should help, but it's even better if you boil these things in a large amount of water. They say a 6-to-1 ratio of water to grains or beans, and then boil them for 5 minutes, and then rinse them, and then cook them as you normally would. And that takes a lot of this residue off of them and makes them much safer for consumption. Artificial sweeteners. So it's generally recommended to transition away from artificial and processed sweeteners. High sucrose can interfere with the detoxification pathways in the body. So it kind of gets in the way. And really what I'd like you to think about doing is gradually converting your sweet tooth to using fruit for your sweeteners. And you can use fruit for cooking. A lot of times if I want something sweet in something I'm baking or cooking, I'll use applesauce or I'll use bananas, things like that. So you can use dates. That's another one. Dates, raisins. So lots of options. So cooking is also another one that is controversial. And the reason it is because there's pros and cons of both. So certain chemicals are destroyed in the process of cooking. For example, in broccoli, it destroys a chemical that is used in the detoxification process. And then other nutrients are actually better released when you cook broccoli, like vitamin A and vitamin E, and lutein, which is good for your eyes. You can add some ground mustard seed to the cooking water while you cook the broccoli, and it actually adds back the chemical that got destroyed with the cooking. So just think about cooking foods just long enough to bring out this beautiful, vibrant color in it. And you will be getting the best of both worlds. You may not be destroying quite so many nutrients in it with the cooking. If you're cooking at high heat, you are going to eventually destroy some of the nutrient value of those foods. So cook at low heat, steaming is great, and just enough to bring out the color. Cookware. This is, when I first learned about this, I was a little bit upset about it because, cookware is expensive. And I had a whole set of cookware that was supposedly supposed to last me 25 years. And it turned out that my old cookware is very good. It's stainless steel cookware. And that's one of the recommended things to cook with is stainless steel. So glass, ceramic, stainless steel, and cast iron are considered the better things to be cooking with. They really have found the cookware that is the non-stick cookware like Teflon and any of the non-stick cookwares tend to have chemicals in them that are released gradually over time into the food that you're eating, and that's why there's such concern about it. So these are things that I always say, just if you're going to replace something like that, just start doing it gradually. Have 1 or 2 pans that you just know are your safe cookware and stick with those. And I know that these cookware things stick to them more, and I'll tell you, a stainless steel scrubber can be your best friend because if you're using the old-fashioned type of cookware, things do stick to it, and stainless steel scrubbers that they have out now are really, they make it much easier to get these foods off those surfaces. So just consider that. Ages. Ages are interesting because ages age you, and ages are advanced glycation end products. That's just a fancy word for the chemicals that are produced when we cook foods at higher temperatures. So these chemicals are found on charred or fried foods that we eat, and they require our bodies to work overtime to try to contend with this very high toxic load. So, just remember that ages, when we measure them in the bloodstream and when your body is producing them, they are a marker of aging, and they do age you, make you age. So how to detoxify all of the time? Okay, that's really going to be the key here. Water. Water is one of the biggest things that you can do, and it's one of the easiest. 8 to 10 glasses a day if you have a normal heart function. If you don't have normal heart function, then I want to make sure that you avoid processed foods because the salt content causes you to have water retention, and especially if you have heart disease or a tendency for water retention, you don't want these salty foods. So that would be all your processed foods in boxes and bags and packages. So filtered water if you can, not necessarily bottled, would be the best, and lots of water. Flush these things through. So the foods that detoxify, they're going to be your cruciferous vegetables. So that's going to be your broccoli, your cauliflower, your watercress, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, radishes, kale. As far as I'm concerned, these are superfoods. These are what I've always thought of in my patient population when I'm talking to people. These are the anti-cancer vegetables, and partly that is due to this highly detoxifying effect of these vegetables. So another one of those is organic soy products. They support detoxification, especially the detoxification of estrogens in the body. People do not detox, some people do not detoxify estrogens well, and it's a genetic tendency in some groups of people. That's why you'll see estrogen related cancers run in families. And so these people just have a tendency to get hormone driven cancers like breast, ovarian, and uterine. But and there's always been some controversy about soy products, and one of the controversies results from these studies being done in the past with both organic and inorganic soy. And what's interesting about soy and pesticides and estrogen is that they all have the same chemical structure. And so in our bodies, the receptors are looking for this particular chemical structure, and soy can adhere to that chemical bond, so can estrogen, and so can pesticides. And so so we would like to not have the pesticides in people who have these tendencies to have these estrogen driven cancers and or hormone driven cancers. And soy is one of those things that helps to it helps to detoxify those estrogens and get them out, but also helps to protect the pesticides from binding where they should not. But don't have, if you're going to use soy for detoxification, do not use non-organic soy. Use only organic so that you're not also dealing with the pesticide load. Some herbs that are, there's a couple that not listed here, but green tea is a really good detoxification herb. So is milk thistle. So is dandelion, nettle, parsley, cilantro. These are all just extremely good herbs for detoxification. Things like thyme, rosemary, and oregano, add them all in. Just put them in your salad dressings, put them on your salad, put them in your food, sprinkle them everywhere. Great for detoxifying. The glymphatic process, we talked about this in the sleep module, but the glymphatic process is a process by which our brain contracts slightly during the night and allows for increased flow of the cerebral spinal fluid in and around the brain. It occurs primarily, again, in deep sleep, and it helps to clear the toxins and the old dead cells and abnormal protein clumps out of the brain. So stress can be particularly toxic because of the chemicals that are being produced during the times of stress. But more than that, because of the cortisol. Cortisol is produced during stress. It initially acts to contain inflammation on a short-term basis, but it becomes highly inflammatory if it's being produced over long periods of time, like with chronic stress. So we just want to really be conscious of the impact of stress when it comes to being toxic for our body and creating a higher toxic load. Inflammation. We're going to move on to inflammation at this point. And what I want you to know about inflammation is that it's our body's way of responding to stress, physical stress, emotional stress, infections, injuries, mental stress. All of this causes some degree of inflammation. And just like when there's any kind of stress, which we talked about last week, like fear, anger, rage, despair, loneliness, all of these are very inflammatory to our body. So the body's normal response to a threat or any kind of damage to normal tissue is inflammation. It's a way for the body to try to limit the damage and protect the rest of the body from whatever is posing a threat. So, for example, when this free radical is bouncing around, damaging these cells, it's creating a damaged cell, and your body detects that, and it sends all of the different chemicals in to that damaged cell to try to contain the damage in this one small area, so that that damage doesn't spread to the surrounding area. So let's look a little further. So inflammation is a very, very complex process, even probably more than the detoxification process. But whether it's more or less, it's extremely complex, and it's normally self-limited. That means it normally shuts down when the threat or the damage has been contained. It involves hundreds of chemical pathways that all interrelate. And when you have a localized inflammatory response, it sends chemicals to, so this red block in the middle, that's talking about trauma, infection, injury, stress. That's your localized process. And once that starts to occur and your body detects that, it's going to send signals to the brain, to the adrenal glands, which are located in your back on top of the kidneys. Those are supposed to be kidneys with yellow adrenal glands on them. And then sends signals to the liver and to the bone marrow, so that they can all do their job to help produce the chemicals that are needed to contain the damage, and then to turn off the inflammation if everything is working properly. You'll notice the brain and the adrenals have a feedback loop here. So the adrenals are sending signals to the brain sending signals to the adrenal glands. But yes, all of this is a very complex pattern in the body. So what does inflammation in the brain actually look like? You just need to be aware that it's things like irritability and anger and moodiness, anxiety, depression. Hallucinations can be a sign of inflammation in the brain. Difficulty with focus, ADHD, autism has huge amounts of inflammation associated with it. Brain fog, and dementia. All of these things have inflammation as at least a portion of what's going on when the person is having trouble with things like that, with brain dysfunction. So cortisol is a stress hormone. We were just talking about it a minute ago, and it carries messages to the liver and other organs, so it can make the chemicals of inflammation for the process of inflammation, and then turning inflammation off. So these chemicals circulate and bathe all our body tissues in an environment that's signaling to the entire system that there's danger, and it triggers a defensive response of the whole body, which is this inflammation. It's not a single process. It involves so many different chemicals, but these inflammatory chemicals can be very damaging to cells, but especially to brain cells, because they're very fragile. And so most people are able to turn this process off when it's no longer needed anymore. But if the stress is ongoing, then the inflammation will be an ongoing process. Or if the person is genetically somebody who just cannot turn it off, their genes don't let them turn it off as easily as the next person. And so those are two types of people that there is a beginning and a middle of this process, but maybe not an end to it. And so we can see a lot more damage, including brain problems in people like that. Another really interesting thing to know, though, is that the Alzheimer's gene is thought to have originally developed in our species because it conferred survival advantage. It allowed certain people to fight infections better because they could mount a really strong inflammatory response to protect themselves. But now in our modern culture, this inflammatory response uh, it doesn't turn off as easily and isn't needed as much as it was in the caveman days. So um, this can be especially damaging when it comes to brain tissue and brain function. And this amyloid that gets deposited in the brain is felt to be a result of that inflammatory process, and these damaged proteins settling into the brain tissue the way they do. So pause. Great. I don't know what I just did, but I thought I paused and I don't think I did. So I just want to talk now about the lifestyle factors that affect the inflammatory process. We're going to start with the antioxidant foods that we just talked about, but also these same foods are often very anti-inflammatory. So if you're having a flare-up of inflammation and pain and swelling, these are the go-to foods. They're going to be things like your nuts, your olive oil, especially your omega-3 fatty acids from your fish, your flavonols from your chocolate, the oils that are in avocado, and what do we have? The broccoli and cruciferous vegetables again, the blueberries, the deep colored berries, and things like that. Here are the eggs. So think anti-inflammatory foods. Movement. Movement is also one of those things that is going to calm this inflammatory process. Make sure that the movement that you're doing is not creating stress and inflammation. And so to be able to pay attention to how how your exercise is affecting you. If you're feeling joint pain, you're probably needing to back off a little bit, let things settle down and heal, and not be overstressing yourself with movement. Sleep. Sleep is essential for the immune system, and this inflammatory response is part of the immune system. And the people who don't sleep, their immune system just goes haywire. They don't do well as far as immune function to fight off illnesses in general, but people will have much more inflammation if they're not sleeping well. And healthy relationships, because they downregulate stress. We talked about this a little bit, but healthy relationships in general make you feel safer for the most part, give you a sense of control and comfort, and they just tend to lower stress and lower cortisol in the body. So. And then during the time of COVID, it was often that one special pet who provided this sense of companionship. And, for people who were so isolated, this was just a lifesaver for them to have a pet to give them that connection and companionship and sense of safety and comfort. And so, that was just a really good time for people who were alone to have a pet. So, relaxation. So our ability to take the stress of the day and let go of it is absolutely essential for turning down this inflammatory response in the body, and just being able to dissolve into a place of pure relaxation and pleasure in the moment. Very, very nice. So really, what all of this is about is taking care of yourself and really having fun doing just that, surrounding yourself daily with the things that make you smile and the things that give you joy. In the words of one of my instructors who was treating primarily cancer patients, we simply need more joy. So I'm just going to tell you, we're just going to end with a story about a man who is actually in love with life. And one of the pleasures that he loves most is food. And I was going to tell you a story about this patient, and I still will. But as I went through this, I was just thinking about this patient and really all of my patients who who need to do these things all of the time, and it's really quite another story to be able to do this day in, day out, all of the time. And so in the real world, my patients usually come to me with very ingrained problems, very long-term problems from years of eating these foods that are not healthy or living with some very poor lifestyle habits. And so in my patients, we generally start with diet because diet can be one of the biggest and the quickest ways to make an impact on these symptoms, especially if they're really, having some very severe symptoms. So, and this was true with my mom that I explained in the beginning of our program that we didn't really know what turned her around so quickly. We didn't know if it was because of the sugar and the high carbohydrate intake, or because of the plant nutrients we were giving her, or because we were decreasing pesticides, because we were using organic foods and a lot of healthy oils and fats. But what I find in my patients is that the majority of people that I see, when we start with diet, they'll have about a 70% reduction in their main symptoms within about 2 months when we start with diet. And this actually, I have to say, has been one of the biggest shocks to me as a physician because I have never seen drugs turn things around as quickly or as thoroughly as the diet can do it. And I was never taught, again, that was what you tried to do in somebody. There was always a drug to give because that's how we are trained in the medical profession. It's a profession that is controlled by the pharmaceutical companies in many ways, and because of that, drugs are your first line of treatment when you're a physician. So it's not, we don't consider that that we're practicing lifestyle medicine. We are considering that we're practicing medicine, which means you give a drug. So the point is that my patients probably are as pleasantly surprised at how well they feel as I am when I see this in my patient population. But also within a couple of months, most people find it very difficult to do these things. The first couple months are okay, but after a while, they start to forget their former misery. And in fact, it becomes more stressful to try to continue all of this. And so everything kind of gradually starts to fall by the wayside. And they'll have a treat here or a treat there, or maybe just take a vacation from it all and they gradually go back to their former habits. And, I have to say, I've done the same thing myself, and I do this same thing. I just went on vacation and I said, okay, I'm going to take a vacation from all of this. And I did pretty well for the first week and a half. And about 2 weeks into it, it hit me like a brick. And I I was in so much pain one night, I could not sleep. I couldn't move and I couldn't sleep. It was really, really hard. And it took 2 to 3 weeks, at least 2 weeks of going back to eating absolutely none of the inflammatory foods and eating all of the anti-inflammatory foods before I could say, okay, I feel better. I feel back to normal again. But so all of my patients do this. And, unfortunately, they have to go back and have this happen before most of them will say, whoa, maybe I need to try that reset diet again. And so usually that's what happens. And so interestingly, I was going to tell you about this gentleman. He pretty much eats everything he feels like, but he eats good food also. So he eats a lot of fruits and vegetables, but he tends to have a donut here or ice cream there. But just recently, this particular gentleman went on a spree in which he was having lots of ice cream, a quart here, a quart there, lots of sugar in his diet. And he asked me if I thought maybe this was making his joint pain worse, because he was having pain everywhere, his shoulders, his wrists, elbows, knees, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. He didn't seem to be doing anything differently in his day other than he was really enjoying the ice cream. And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe you should, like I say to most of my patients, maybe it's that, wine that's gotten back into the diet, or maybe it's, whatever their treat is that they're treating themselves with. So I kind of said that to him, and he said, well, maybe I'll stop, and then I'll experiment. I'll try an ice cream and see what happens. So that's what he did, and lo and behold, he got to the point, first of all, where he was feeling more comfortable again, and then he tried this milkshake. And then he waited probably 48 hours. And at about 48 hours, he could feel the pain again. And so it was very obvious to him that there was a difference in this, in how he felt with the ice cream and without. And what I tell everybody is that, we try to do these things day in and day out, and we do our best. And if we can't, or it's a vacation or a holiday and we want to treat ourselves, we do it consciously. We say, okay, I know it causes that, but I think, I'm willing to put up with a few days of pain or a couple weeks of pain. If it's like me, I had a couple weeks. I'm willing to put up with that for the pleasure of this treat. And so you do. And you just know that that's what you've decided. And then when you're done feeling the pain, or you're not feeling so well, and you're ready to go back and reset, then you do. And you give yourself the opportunity to do that, and you don't judge yourself for it. That's your decision. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that we will end there for the evening. And so we've just talked about the impact of lifestyle, the foods, and the sleep, and the stress management. Sorry about that. I keep bumping into this. So we've kind of gone over the impact of lifestyle, the foods, the sleep, the stress management, the exercise, the social connections. And all of these impacts on our body's ability to remove toxins and manage inflammation. And in particularly, we went over the detrimental effects that result from the failure to effectively neutralize and eliminate free radicals, the most highly reactive form of the toxin molecules from the body. So these reactive molecules, if they're not neutralized and removed, they set the stage for inflammation because of the damage that's caused by these free radicals. And this attracts the whole cascade of events that is the inflammatory process, because it's the body's effort to protect itself. So, in particularly, the fragile nature of brain cells simply underscores the need for our lifestyle habits to limit the damaging effects of toxins and inflammation and to safeguard our cognitive well being. So, that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.